Welcome, guys, to another episode of the Evolution Podcast. In today's episode of the podcast, I have a special guest. Today's guest is going to be joining me. We're going to be talking about marketing. We're going to be talking about market insights, and we're going to be talking about everything that you need to help. That's going to help you grow your business. And he's going to be giving us new nuggets, and he's also going to be giving us a few details from his book. So, Dan, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, hi, I'm Dan Albaum. I've been a marketing leader for several decades, and I'm passionate about connecting and building relationships and helping others really reach their full potential. And I really appreciate the opportunity to chat with you today.
Absolutely love it. So I'm very curious. So I saw you worked at Cisco. You helped in the
Yes.
marketing team at Cisco. So what was that like? Because Cisco has been a company that's been around for a very, very long time. So I'm very curious as to what was your marketing experience back then?
Yeah, what an experience it was. And working at a time in a very fast growing emerging technology area, which was voice technologies. And a couple of things that were really important there. One is the importance of a global perspective. Cisco
Okay.
was a global company and bringing these new technologies in fast developing markets around the world. And so the importance of having that macro global perspective and working with global teams that came from different cultural backgrounds, spoke different languages. That was one of the big things that I took from that experience, was really building my confidence and ability to be more effective in building those global relationships and then delivering these innovative solutions to growing businesses around the world.
So how was the marketing strategy? What was it? Was you guys more of a was your marketing more of a B2B kind of deal or B2C?
Yeah, definitely more of a B2B
Okay.
market at that time in the voice technologies. And one of the important strategies there was really having clear segmentation and really understanding the dynamics of how that market broke down. And at that time, really thinking about enterprise businesses in a
Okay.
different way than small and medium-sized businesses. And so by creating specific business units or segment groups that could really do the profiling, the audience segmentation, the messaging development that was
Okay.
uniquely best tailored to those audiences, it really then helped those technologies flourish in terms of the marketing effort because you were more relevant. You were able to message and communicate and engage in a more
Mm.
meaningful way because you were taking the time to really segment, understand the unique needs of those different segments.
Interesting. Okay, so now I'm very curious as far as so in a on an entrepreneur in an enterprise way of marketing, right? How do you get their attention? Is it like more of like a cold door to door kind of deal where you knock on an office and you're like, hey, we're with Cisco and we're here to help your business, or how are you able to get the business's attention?
Yeah, that's a great question and really a multifaceted approach. And so some of these would be outbound marketing approaches. So things like email, for example, to build awareness and better understanding, and typically with a call to action. And so you could create demand, the top end of what we would call that sales funnel, very early interest prospect perspective there. And so utilize some of those traditional outbound tools, but obviously things such as social media, another tactic to help create and support those campaign themes. At the same time, certainly within Cisco, that or actually have opportunities with very large enterprises. Sometimes it was very appropriate to take very customized down to a single client. And so these concepts of account-based marketing, where you actually are developing campaigns to decision makers and influencers within a single entity, within a single enterprise, and be able to go and initiate that on the marketing end in conjunction with the sales outreach, right? In terms of the
Mhm.
sales conversation as you guide them through those early stages of the sales process. So it was really very much of a teaming effort between marketing and sales in terms of both first building demand and then moving that to interest and then hopefully purchase as part of that cycle.
Interesting. So what was the life? What was this is just out of care. What was the life cycle of the sales process? Because like I'll give you an example. We have our sales process is pretty much we either have a one call sales process or a three call sales process where we would get on the phone, get interest, then we would do a discovery call, and then after the discovery call, then we would take a point at which we get someone started and then the onboarding and then collect payment. So what was that process as far as like with Cisco? What was that process as far as the cycle of turning someone from yes, I'm interested to actually collecting payment?
Yeah, it really could vary, but I mean, oftentimes this could be a several month to a year plus Because if you're talking about, especially if it's a purchase that is going to be multi-site, impacting multi-sites or even multi-country, that's an involved process. Sometimes you have to go through a more formalized bid process, or where they're evaluating multiple solutions. And so this could be literally as long as 9 or 12 months or more. In case of SMBs, maybe you're down into more of a 3 to 6 month time period. But these were not typically the nature of the sales within the Cisco environment was not typically just an impulse purchase that's going to be very transactional and happen immediately, real time. So it was definitely a process to work through.
Gotcha. Okay. So now, what's interesting to look at, and I'm thinking about it from a perspective of, let's say you're starting out right now and you're starting a business, brand new business. What strategies would you take, especially if you're doing more of a B2B and you're going to do enterprise sales? What were the strategies you take into play as far as marketing your products and at least getting that first dollar?
Yeah, one of the first and most important and fundamental things in terms of that approach is understand your audience. Really be able to know what their needs and their pain points are. And the essence of your message to really get attention and to resonate needs to be more a reflection of understanding what those pain points are. I think oftentimes, especially with a new product, or if it's an entrepreneurial situation, kind of brand new business, there's an anxiousness to want to get into the conversation and let me tell you about all of the features and the capabilities that my product or service has. And at a certain point, it's important, of course, to understand that. But if you're really trying to break through, why should someone in a sea of emails and a sea of calls, their cold calls, a sea of information that's out there, why should they stop and listen? The thing that's going to resonate that I've found in working in various businesses over time, if you start with a sound understanding of what those pain points are and can articulate those in a compelling way, preferably through storytelling or perhaps in the form of a success story of someone like that audience that's relating very much about those pain points and how they were solved, that is going to stop, get attention, and put you in a position to have a meaningful conversation and to move through the sales process.
Interesting. You said some keywords there, which was very interesting. You said the word storytelling. Up until recently, I never actually, even I wouldn't say recently, but until I started selling, I didn't realize the impact of stories, right? Where, I can tell you that, oh, well, what's interesting was, so there was a story that a guy used, because I was in insurance sales and life insurance sales. And he would tell his, imagine if I told you and said, hey, you should get this life insurance because if you get this life insurance, it will protect your family. Right? And I was like, okay, yeah, makes sense. Versus if I tell you a story of, this lady who, she refused to get insurance and she had insurance with her job, and then she passed away, and now the family has to struggle, because it's like it's almost like a fascinating thing where the human mind, we relate more with other people's story because we put ourselves in their shoes and we think, oh my God, okay, so what if this is me? Right.
Right.
So I'm curious as far as, so if you're telling, if stories are important, right? What aspect would you say, what are the kinds of stories you can say? Like, let's use an example of, if I was selling cars, right? What would be a great, I guess, key point of a story that you'd want to kind of have and tell the buyer for the most part?
Yeah, I think a story to tell would be something that's very relatable, which is, in today's world with the uncertainty over rising gas prices, rising costs of maintaining vehicles, isn't it wonderful to have peace of mind to have and in this case, maybe it's an electric car that you're selling, and then you're selling the benefits of really a much more economical model in terms of cost of ownership, but maybe relating that in the form of a manual who had been used to, just and really had a lot of despair over these rising gas prices. And every time he took it in for maintenance, and to say, and now being transformed through the purchase that we made just within the last couple of months, and just checking in on a manual and just seeing, boy, he's got more cash in his pocket and a much, much less uncertain type of environment because of the reliability that you get with an electric vehicle. And so just personalizing it, and something, we have this concept of projection, right? And so if you start telling a story about someone else, an experience, human nature is to immediately try to come up with some parallel in terms of, is that similar to something that I have experienced? or I can relate to because I've had that feeling before. And so if you can set up a situation where someone is actively kind of in that process of projection, your chances of being able to really resonate and connect with them goes up dramatically, as opposed to just a purely informational, data-oriented conversation where I'm going to just spit out some facts and figures about, miles per gallon or average, cost per month. That's okay, credible, because it's data
Yeah.
coming from some sort of source, but I'm not really being put in the shoes of a human story that I can project to. And so that's where the personalized storytelling really pays off, when you bring that in.
So, just out of curiosity, do you drive a Tesla?
My wife drives the Tesla.
So she's the one with the money, saving all the money there.
She's saving the money, and she is loud every time I come back with my Forerunner, and I tell her how much was it at the pump. She asks me, and I tell her, and she just smiles. So
Yeah.
I'll get there. I'll get there eventually, Manuel.
No, absolutely no. That's fun. No, but it's funny. I was looking at the Tesla because it's not even based off of the fact that it's an EV car. Because if you look at emissions, I mean, I don't really think it's going to make much of a difference. But it's just convenient. It's comfortable, and it's a great like around the city car.
Yeah.
Right, because you get like I think what 400 miles of charge, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, maybe even a little less, but
Yeah.
we have road tested that car. I mean, she did full down the West Coast to California and back, and it's just amazing. This is back to just how rapidly it's amazing, the supply chain and the support systems, how fast they grow with the demand growing. And now it's really not even a consideration. If you're in within a reasonable population area, there's no reason you can't take these cars on really long road trips and really enjoy the performance and the driving experience.
Interesting. And you know what's interesting just about Tesla, and you know who's the number one salesperson for Tesla, right?
Well, you're going to tell me who that is.
Elon.
It would be Elon. Well, it's
Yeah.
he's the brand.
He's the brand, right? He's the brand. Now, I'm very curious about. So this is just a conversation here. So I know a lot of business owners that don't want to be the face of your company. Right? They're like, I don't want to be the face of my company. I hate being on camera. I'm shy. I don't want to, I don't want to be the face. What would you say to someone who's like, yeah, I don't want, I have a good product, but I don't want to be the face of the company?
Yeah. What I would say is that back to the point of building a solution, whether it's a product or it's a service, that is very clearly and directly addressing a relevant pain point of your audience. Okay. Let that be your lead story. It's okay. You don't necessarily need to be the face of the company when you have a compelling addressing of the pain point in a unique and differentiated way. So to me, it comes down to hire a team, to whatever your ability is, that has the skill set to be able to go out and understand what those customer pain points are, and then have the communication skills through those different communication channels. Or if you're in an indirect selling model, you're working with partners, make sure that you have clear criteria in terms of your partners' capabilities to be able to represent your brand, and let that be the lead. It doesn't need to come down to a personification per se behind the brand. There are so many examples of great brands that don't necessarily have a singular person identified with it. So that's not a prerequisite.
Interesting. So you if I'm understanding, it's kind of more of a situation of more of like a partnership kind of deal. Is what you're saying, like kind of find someone who's more like in the media, more kind of extroverted per se.
Well, more around if you're both directly selling through your own sales team, but in some of these markets, like at Cisco, for example, we had a very robust partner network. So oftentimes our solutions were sold by partner organizations that were representing Cisco. You need to hold the same standard, have a very clear standard for being on brand, if you will, in terms of the way that you engage, the way you communicate. And so you have consistency, right? And so it's really quality control and integrity through a channel strategy versus a direct selling strategy. But whatever the case might be, it still doesn't need to come down to the essence of what makes me different is a singular face. Now, sometimes with a compelling visionary that's in the role, that can be a key differentiator and part of the mix, but it doesn't have to be in terms of how you go to market.
Interesting. So, which is interesting, you mentioned the Cisco as far as having partners, because I've found that in the tech space, what a lot of companies do is they do a licensing model, right? Where you basically have somebody else leverage your brand, and if I'm not mistaken, it's kind of like, let's say I'm Cisco, I hire 20 or 50 other people as subcontracted agencies per se, and then they go ahead and they get, it's more like a revenue share, right?
Yeah. I mean, typically there's some sort of a business agreement structure where that revenue is basically parsed out,
Mm,
depending on what the
interesting.
nature of the relate, whether it's a resell agreement, joint distribution agreement, what have you. But one of the things, Emmanuel, getting to the book which you mentioned earlier, which is the impact makers. One of the aspects that I talk about in terms of exceptional leadership, one of the dimensions is around relationship building. And that comes into play on an interpersonal level, certainly within
Mm,
an organization, but it also applies to organization
okay.
relationships. And that's even into this idea of partnerships and, introduce the idea of ecosystems, right? What are ecosystems? Ecosystems in nature are all of these kind of interconnected elements. It could be natural, tide pools, for example. You can go out and look at biology and look at how all of these different elements within a functioning ecosystem work, but there is this kind of underlying complementary nature of how it all comes together. And so if you have a strong sense of what your values are in terms of what your vision is for the customer experience, it's important in those partnerships that you form, that you want to maintain integrity around that and consistency and really hold to that standard, as opposed to just chasing after additional transactional opportunities, through those partnerships. Yes, you want them to perform and have clear accountability around that, but you want them to really be an extension of your brand, not something that is actually fighting or undermining your brand, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense. And you mentioned something about relationships, right? Can you expand a little bit more on that? I'll just unpack that a little bit.
Yeah. Relationships that are built first and foremost around trust and around
Okay.
mutual respect, and ultimately around accountability. So that if we trust each other and we're transparent with each other, then our confidence in setting very clear mutual accountability expectations is going to be much greater than if that trust doesn't exist. And so you really need to start. And there's a lot of discussion out this, of course, around relationship. It makes sense that you would start with a strong trust foundation, but the
Hmm.
key is, how do you extend that into meaningful accountability, joint mutual accountability in that relationship? And it all begins by having a really strong trust foundation.
Interesting. Okay. So I'm trying to understand a little bit more in this. So in that sense of trust foundation from a business to business to client perspective, is that what you mean per se?
Relationships come in at the client, the company to client level as well, which is taking an approach, again, by you coming in and really beginning the conversation
Mm,
with making it about them, as
mm,
opposed to making it about yourself, or a set of talking points about speeds and feeds, is what we used to
yeah.
call it in the tech world, or feature functionality. Not starting there, but really starting and making it about the client. What you're signaling there is really one aspect of servant leadership, that you
Mm.
bring into a relationship, which is really around putting others first and lifting others, as opposed to making it about yourself.
Interesting. Servant leadership. I mean, even I don't know if you're a Christian, but the Bible says, let the greatest amongst you be a servant of all, right? I mean, that's me paraphrasing. I may be wrong, I might be right from that, but that's interesting though. So in a sense, it's into what is the goal of the obviously talk about relationships with the book, right? What is the goal? What was the message? What were you trying to accomplish with the book?
Here's the thing: the book was really ultimately another way for me to be able to help others. That's been a strong thread, even beginning with my upbringing, and something that my parents instilled in me was this
Mhm.
idea of impact in the world. Begins with how you're able to lift and help others. And
Gotcha.
so, how could I do that? I've brought that mindset in to multiple decades in leading marketing teams in a variety of different industries, tech industries, fitness industries, now working for a nonprofit in the education space. And so I bring that to work every day. How could I extend that impact and be able to extend that servant leader mindset and reach more people and to help more people. And in writing this book was really one way of being able to do that, take the best of the learnings and the conversations that I had in my Market Impact Insights podcasts, reaching just about 135 episodes so far. So we've got a lot of volume and a lot of breadth of conversations to draw from.
Congratulations on that.
And my own experience. Yeah. And just bring that. And you know, we were talking about storytelling earlier. And one of the things I found, Emmanuel, you've probably noticed this, if you go out, there's tons of books out there, really high quality books about business strategy, marketing strategy. But something that kind of is a turnoff for me is if I go in and the book is really more of a, hey, I'm going to tell you how to do it. And it's very much of more of just a purely instructional and coming from the perspective of sit back, you know, trust me, I'm going to just tell you, I'm giving you the formula and how to do it. My approach in this book, I very much wanted it to be about human connection and human stories and deliver learning through the storytelling and through the voices of people, as opposed to more of a theoretical, you know, conceptual, you know, instruction. And so in the book, you will hear the voices of 82 highly successful global leaders, literally from every corner of the earth, that are bringing in different aspects of exceptional leadership, including how do you build and foster a culture of innovation within your teams and your organizations? How do you drive effective, trusted relationships? How do you leverage and value and reinforce diversity within your teams and organizations? How do you make better informed decisions by harnessing the power of data? How do you bring exceptional leadership behaviors into play every single day? And then a final dimension in the book as part of the storytelling, Emmanuel, that is something I found to be very powerful. And that is more of a mindset driver, not a behavioral driver, which is optimism and the power of optimism. So those are the principles. And within each of those, I wanted to weave in real stories, real experiences from these successful leaders around the world, which I think makes for a more interesting and a more relevant experience than had I just started with here's a concept of best practice and just follow along and connect the dots. So bringing the human element in.
I love it. Can you give us an example of a few of the leaders that you have on your book?
Sure. Yeah. We have leaders from a variety of different disciplines. I have an example actually in the foreword, and then also featured in the book, Joe Burton, who's currently the CEO of Telesign, which is a technology company. Joe was someone that I had worked with at Cisco, and Joe comes from an engineering background. And one of the things that he talks about is when we first developed our relationship back in the 90s, was we were coming together from very different perspectives. He was very much around from an engineering, technical, quantitative perspective. I was coming from the marketing and communication side, more of a qualitative, but yet that was something that made our relationship work so well, is we kind of brought those complementary skill sets. But the one thing that we shared was a belief in the power of putting the customer first, understanding the customer needs, again, in that Cisco environment initially, the importance of employee engagement, and something that he's carried forward as a CEO, and driving a strong culture of highly engaged employees that are asked to give feedback, but actually that feedback is taken and applied into actual decisions so they can visibly see that. So culture building has been really important for him. So that's one example. Another example, great story that we tell is Julie Dexter-Berg. Julie is someone that I work with in the wireless industry. And Julie was telling the story. This is the example of how far we've come. Sometimes it's easy to forget how much things have changed and evolved, of her early days as a female leader, even moving up at a director level in a consumer products company, and remembering at the time a senior level meeting at headquarters where there were no female restrooms at all on the executive floor. This presumption of lack of gender diversity, and we're talking 30 years ago. And now fast forward to where it's just we've seen the emergence and growth of tremendous female leadership. But she tells a story of just kind of at the very beginning how tough it was to kind of forge a path and to create the opportunities that now more and more very capable, incredible female leaders have. So those are just a few examples. And again, we've got many, many more in the book.
Wow, that's interesting. Now, you mentioned a few things which is very important there, and obviously, I think the book is obviously something people should check out. I think you guys definitely 100% should. The book will be in the description, so at the time you're watching this, guys, you can go ahead and check the description, and you'll be able to pretty much get the book. And we're also going to be talking about your podcast as well. And if you want to go ahead and check out the podcast, you can go to marketimpactnow.com, and you can go ahead and pretty much check out the podcast. But you mentioned something about culture, right? You mentioned something about culture.
No.
What would you do, or what does it take when you have somebody who is fostering bad culture? Like you have an employee or someone who comes into business who's just, how would I call it? Just a pain and nuisance for the most part for everybody, right? What is that? Because we live in a very gray area as far as the workspace is concerned, right? So what is that? How would you tackle that?
Yeah, well, I think if we look at the senior leadership group, and I think that's a really important setting the tone part of really defining and then nurturing any sort of culture. It really does start with senior leadership, because eyes are on senior leaders. What they're modeling can be highly influential in terms of really seeing that culture thrive and be able to grow. And I think we all can relate to, we've probably seen it, where it's very clear. There are examples where that senior leadership team, a CEO and senior leaders, you can just tell, as someone that's kind of in the ranks, you can tell when they're on the same page. There are ways to just see that, there seems to be really agreement. They're all expressing through their behaviors a reinforcement of that culture. We're seeing examples in either meetings, separate meetings that they're hosting, calling what their body language and behavior is at town halls, when everyone's coming together. And you can just tell when that exists, and you can also tell where it doesn't exist. And ultimately, as a senior leader, and this can be really, really hard, right? No one enjoys, making a change. No one enjoys firing, someone if it's just not working out. We want it to work, and we should expect that it's going to work out. But having decisiveness to realize if there is not alignment, if there is not core alignment on the cultural values of the company, especially at that senior leadership team, the reality is tough decisions need to be made in the best interest of the organization. And the best thing that a leader can do, a CEO, founder, is to say, to know when it's time, that it's in both parties' best interest to make a change. So that would be one thing that, unfortunately, is something that's going to be required in some cases in order to be able to really allow that culture to thrive.
Got you. So, okay, perfect. No, awesome. And what I'm just, obviously, this is all my curiosity here. Obviously, 135 episodes, guys. Just for you guys to pretty much pay attention. 135 episodes is not a small feat. It's not something that overnight that's achieved overnight. So kudos to you, Dan, for reaching those numbers. What was the inspiration behind the podcast?
Yeah, I think the podcast was really an outgrowth after having all of those experiences in leading teams and working in both large and smaller organizations. Something that I've always been about is, I mentioned before, developing relationships, human connection. It's what we do in marketing all the time. That's how I learn and grow and thrive, which is part of that. And again, back to my goal of helping people. So how could I both help people and also help myself in terms of my continuous growth and development, is to create new relationships and have more conversations with people even outside of my immediate professional circle. And with the really the advent of the podcast technology and just making it more accessible and the ability to do that, it's like, look, I'm having these conversations. I'm trying to go out and grow my network. Why not actually create something that can benefit others, not just myself? And so that is from where Market Impact Insights was born. And it's really about bringing people in. Some people I have had a historical relationship. Many people that I might be meeting for the first time because they're a great fit for the platform and they have a great story, an important story to tell. And so I'm accomplishing both of those objectives through Market Impact Insights.
No, that's very interesting. No, so, and you've had the podcast for what, 5 years?
That's right. Late in 2018 is when we launched it. So yeah, coming up on 5 years.
Nice. I mean, you were pretty much one of the originals to basically start the podcast before podcasting became famous for the most part, because podcasting used to not be a thing a few years back, but now it's pretty much everyone has a podcast, which is phenomenal, by the way. So what if would you say is a key difference between marketing back when you were marketing with Cisco and marketing now?
Yeah, I'd say one of the things that's really changed, is really fast evolving, is the importance of data and analytics. I mean,
Okay.
there was always an element of that there, but I would just say, so you may have heard the term, is marketing art or is it science? And I would
Mm,
just say that going back 20, 30 years ago, there was probably more art with
mm,
some science. And I would say things have kind of flipped around now to where effective marketing is being much better at being able to not only gather the right kind of data around your metrics, establishing clear objectives that are actually measurable around everything from prospect engagement to effectiveness in terms of lead generation, in terms of the whole sales process, the customer journey,
mm.
aligning out content strategies, delivering the right content to the right people at the right time, understanding a lot of the science around that, and then interpreting data. We have much more data available to us today because we're using a lot more of automated systems to deliver those communications than we did 20 or 30 years ago. But it's not just enough to collect a bunch of data, because you can drown under a lot of data. You really need to be able to make meaningful interpretation, of the data. But it's changed. The skill set, Emmanuel, is different. You
Yeah.
need people that are comfortable in working with data and being able to get that interpretive piece out, not just the qualitative. You still need that, but it's not just leaning in on the qualitative.
Interesting. So there's more. It's more of a science now because obviously with have you used any artificial intelligence in any of your marketing recently?
We are just starting to incorporate some elements of that. I would just say for us in the current, Committee for Children organization, we are kind of at the early stage of that. But it's definitely something we are educating the organization more around. We've had some sessions where we're kind of getting people more versed up on generative AI. What does this mean? What implications does it have? And everything from, it's not just the marketing, it's
Mm.
how can we apply that into things like product development, and the research side of things. So we are like many, we are at the front end of that journey, but we know that it's an important thing to up our knowledge and confidence in terms of what this means and how do we best utilize it.
Interesting. Okay. No, I love it. I love it. You mentioned a few key things there. But one more thing, and I personally have been in a position where I actually wanted to start a nonprofit, for mostly for mental health. But talk to me a little bit about the process between, starting a community for children, what you do and what's the impact you're hoping to make, to use your word.
Yeah, yeah. No, thank you. Yeah, well, first of all, Committee for Children, founded in 1979. So this is an
Okay.
organization that strong, amazing track record. And at its core, has a very clear vision, which is all about safe children thriving in a peaceful world. And
Mm,
so the mechanism by which we support that out of this nonprofit, one of the ways we do that is through social emotional learning programs. And so we have a very aspirational goal to positively impact, positively transform the social emotional health of 100 million children around the world by 2030. And so
gotcha.
establishing, that's our North Star, that's our aspirational goal. We have a second step social emotional learning program, which has been adopted by many of the districts, leading districts across the United States. And we also work with partners in countries outside of the United States. But it's really being able to, again, foster the health and the wellness of the children and also the staff and the adults in their lives as well, in the classroom or staff within the schools and the districts, because we do have a social emotional learning for adults program as
Mm,
well, in addition to the student facing. And so it's through these programs that we're trying to make that kind of impact. And for me, as someone who had worked in the for-profit space for all of my career, when a recruiter reached out and talked to me about this opportunity to come lead a marketing team at Committee for Children, what spoke to me was having the ability to bring my skill set in and have a multi-generational impact on really helping improve the human condition. So we all have had experiences, if we worked in the for-profit world, about enhancing shareholder value, and had a
Yeah.
lot of experience doing that. But this was in essence, a chance to make a more and a different kind of impact to that next generation and subsequent generations of kids, by really making this world a better place and making them better prepared to go and make a positive impact in the world. So that spoke to me very much. It spoke to my heart. It was the right time to be able to do that. And so now I feel like, wow, it's the best of both worlds. I'm supporting a mission that on a personal level, I'm extremely passionate about, but I also feel like I can bring all my experience to work every day, and work with the tools and have a great team that has a lot of marketing experience, and just do what we love as marketers, but also in support of a different kind of mission than what I had been accustomed to in the for-profit world.
Interesting. Gotcha. So what do you, when you say social emotional, what does that entail?
It's really it's being better in touch and better managing of your emotions, and so things like resilience and being able to show empathy towards others, and really kind of teaching a way of being able to better manage or regulate, and just really just kind of navigate through the natural course that we all face in terms of what life brings us, at different stages of our life, like
Yeah.
pressures, at different stages. And so really think of it as a roadmap, to kind of help and better prepare in really giving you a set of life skills that ultimately are really important as you move on from the education environment into your professional life as well.
Interesting. So you mentioned, like, the things that, you experience in life. And I can say this, that entrepreneurship, you and I know, is not easy. It's filled with a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, right? So even in the business world per se, I mean, what are the challenges that you've faced? And because there's someone watching this right now that is probably at the point at which they're about to give up. They probably launched a marketing campaign and didn't see any results, or they have, if you, looking at the business right now, the rise in interest rates, most business owners are not able to get the loans that they need to get to run their business. So there's those struggles for the average day-to-day business owner. So what would you say? What was one of those big moments that you had, especially, starting up early in your career, and how were you able to overcome them?
Yeah, well, the thing that I would point to um, is and a powerful message, and I actually lead off the book telling a story about this, is that very early in my career, I did not benefit from having really great supportive servant leadership. I had
Mm.
exactly the opposite of that. I had, experiences where it felt to me as if, hey, my manager's role was to actually point out the reasons why I was not going to succeed, and it was
Mm.
actually pressing down as opposed to lifting up. And it built in me a determination that when I was in a position of leading others, that I was not going to continue that type of leadership. That there was a better way of putting others first, of lifting, about giving people empowerment to go. And actually, this is a big important point, Emmanuel, which is, what is failure? Failure would be to not learn from an experience and to apply that going forward. So to not meet a goal is not necessarily failure, because the learning and the application for continuous improvement is
Mm.
success, because you are continuing, to on your second, your third, and fourth. And there are so many stories, right, of successful businesses or successful ideas that wasn't the first idea. It wasn't the first generation of the idea. It took refinement. It took some falling down and learning from those experiences. So I know this probably something that we all can relate to, but don't be afraid to to not hit that goal. If you don't reach that goal, what can you take? What can you assess from that? That again, with a solutions mindset, how do we take that learning and apply it to a better outcome, as opposed to wallowing in hey, I just want to stay here and I want to figure out who was to blame, why did this happen? Yeah, it's important to understand, that's part of the learning, but don't stay in that space of looking backward. Look forward and apply the learning, and you will see much better outcomes going forward. that's something that was really powerful for me early in my career, and I've tried to bring that subsequently into each of the teams, that I lead, and each of the organizations that I've gone to work with.
No, I love it. I love it. So if let's say I'm listening to this right now, and I like what you're saying, and I really want to get your book. Where can people find your book?
Oh, the book is really easy. Wherever you go out and either buy your books, you can go to Amazon, Barnes and Noble, those online retailers. It's available in both printed form. I've got the audiobook version. Some people enjoy that more, as well as the ebook. So you've got your choice of formats. Really easy to get. The Impact Makers.
Okay, guys. So there will be a link. There will be a link in the description for for impact makers. So you can, I believe we'll probably put in the Amazon link in there. So you guys can definitely go check out the book. Obviously, if you want to learn how you can make more of an impact in the world, which is something at the end of the day we all live to do, because you can make. Because I always say this is you could make 10, 20, 30, 40 million dollars in this entire world, but if at the end, when we all leave and go to our maker, we leave the money back here. But the little impact we make in people's lives, our kids, the people we come across, relationships we build, that I think is the long-term investment. So what's next for you, Dan? What's the next thing?
I'm continuing to build out the podcast, have some amazing guests that we're continuing with new episodes that are coming, and including beginning next week. And then I've actually got a desire at some point to write book number 2. And this will probably be a collaboration in nature, and it will probably be bringing in stories of resilience, of overcoming challenges, and having the resilience for success. So just stay tuned. There could be another book on the way.
All right, guys. So definitely, guys, get the first book.
That's right.
Impact makers. Let's get the first book. Okay, let's get it to be an Amazon. Let's get it to be an Amazon. Let's be New York, because let's get it to be a New York bestseller. Okay, let's get the book there. Definitely go check out the book, and obviously, make sure you're following his podcast. The links to the book and the podcast will be in the description, guys. So definitely go check out the book, check out the podcast, so you can know when the next book comes out. And Dan, it was an absolute pleasure having you on. And what I mean, I learned a lot just from listening to what you say as far as relationships, and that's something I had to learn, especially in sales, because sales is not really a product game. Just to give you an example, I had a sale where I had a company, I'm not going to name the name of the company, wanted me to pretty much get into their product, kind of like what I wouldn't say similar to Cisco, but kind of where they needed a partner to rep the product. And I had no issues with the price range, but just the way the sales rep spoke was just kind of like it was like a demeaning kind of way of like, it was kind of like, and all I had was questions. I just want to know, you want 100 grand? Just answer my questions, right? And it was like I had questions, but the guy got pissed off that I had questions, and he was like, well, I can find somebody else to get the money. And I was like, hey, well, it was great conversation. So
It was interesting. I went through, as part of that commitment to continuous learning education, went through a great executive program at Stanford University around persuasion. And one of the components that we talked about during that course was engagement. And how do you create better engagement? Asking questions and showing active interest and having eye contact. I mean, a lot of things sometimes we take for granted, but it's amazing, isn't it, how often that doesn't actually happen. And and instead of asking questions, I'm talking as the rep, and I'm talking and I'm talking. I'm not taking a breath. And instead of actually showing active interest in asking the question and then listening and understanding, back to that understanding of what the problem, the pain point is. So you're spot on there in terms of some of the stuff that's not going right, but how we can actually, by taking that active interest, really lead to better results.
absolutely. Yeah, no, and you're right in the sense as to, and I took out of that conversation, I'm like, this is exactly how not to have a really high ticket sales conversation of talking down to your customer. Just I was like, hey, that's pretty good. To each his own. It's not my company. I think phenomenal product, but they just need to work on their people, that because it's a weird thing where we could have a phenomenal product, but we relate our experiences with the sales rep to the product.
Right, right.
Right. So it's almost, yeah.
It happens. And so never underestimate the power of human connection and all of those things that actually create more positive human connection. And by bringing that mindset and those behaviors in as a seller of that product, you are going to find that you're going to be much more successful over the long run.
Awesome. Perfect. Dan, it was great having you on. Thank you, guys. Definitely go check out the book. Definitely go check out Dan's podcast. And thanks again, guys. And everyone, you guys have a great and